As the Trump administration ramps up its deportation efforts, as we're discussing, one New York lawmaker says he witnessed it firsthand. Video shows Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman confronting ICE agents back in May in a federal building that houses both his office as well as an immigration court. Goldman says that the agents wore plainclothes and masks as they arrested asylum seekers who were there for routine court appearances. And Congressman Goldman joins us now. He's a member of the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. Congressman, good to see you. So let's start right there. First of all, the tactics these ICE agents using, wearing masks, even though President Trump on a nearly daily basis is telling protesters not to wear masks, ICE agents seem to be allowed to do so. Also, where they tried to make these arrests and therefore starting the deportation process at immigration court. People who are trying to do the right thing by checking in or whatever process they have right now, and instead they're maybe afraid to do so. Talk to us about what you saw that day.
Well, what's going on is this new policy that Stephen Miller has orchestrated, which is designed solely to increase the number of deportations. And while Donald Trump promised to go after convicted criminals and the worst of the worst, he's doing the exact opposite. What the Department of Homeland Security is doing is they're going into court. They're dismissing their own case, a removal case against immigrants. In many of those cases, the immigrants have done what they're legally allowed to do, which is to file asylum claims. Asylum is a lawful pathway to come into the United States. The Department of Homeland Security is dismissing their own cases, which voids out the asylum claim. The immigrants are then leaving court, going downstairs into the lobby of the building where my district office is, and there are a number of ICE agents, plainclothes, unidentified, wearing masks, who arrest them and send them into a different removal proceeding called expedited removal, where there's minimal due process and there's not enough time for them to refile their asylum claim. So these are people following lawful process, following the proper immigration proceedings for people who are seeking asylum, which is a lawful pathway. And instead, what's happening is they're being hoodwinked, essentially, and arrested. So these are people doing it the right way, who are nonviolent, non-criminal, and they're getting arrested. So what message does that send? Obviously, it sends the message, don't do things the right way. Go further underground. Don't appear in court. Don't follow lawful process. Don't pay your taxes, because many have work visas. And that's just going to make the public less safe.
Congressman, NBC News is reporting that now these tactical units are going to be expanded into cities like Chicago, Northern Virginia, New York, and other places in Northern Virginia. I will note that will include going into the D.C. area over the next couple of days to ramp up these what can only be described as snatch and grabs. Is this legal? These nondescript individuals who we can only assume are federal agents. But as you noted, the federal agents in the courthouse in the federal building you were in did not have any insignia to say who they were with. Is this a legal thing that is happening to folks across the country? And I will note, it's not just the Latino or Hispanic community. We're talking about Haitians, literally anyone who is not an American citizen, and in some instances, actual Americans who just fit the profile.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues here. There's equal protection issues, due process issues under the Constitution, whether or not they're following the protocols of the federal government. I will be introducing a bill that will prevent Homeland Security officers from hiding or concealing their identities and wearing masks, because we don't live in a country, an authoritarian country, where we have secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people. That's the stuff of authoritarian states. That is not the stuff of that's not how the United States operates. And that's really where this is breaking down, is the combination of these Gestapo-like tactics with the fact that these are nonviolent, non-criminal immigrants doing things the right way. And that's why you're seeing protests all around the country. It's not that they're protesting that people who have convictions are being removed. They're protesting that they're going after all of our communities. And
a rare rebuke of the Trump White House from a Republican. It is coming from Senator Rand Paul, who is accusing the White House of immaturity and petty vindictiveness. His words, this after he and his family were disinvited from the annual White House picnic. The White House has not responded to these comments. Perspective now from our chief congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, what more is Senator Paul saying?
Well, he's very frustrated, John. In fact, this is an event that is a bipartisan one. Democrats and Republicans typically attend this every single year with presidents of both parties. Paul has been to 10 of these, but he thinks he is now the first senator ever to be disinvited from this event. He believes this is what, quote, petty vindictiveness. He says that he has lost a lot of respect from Donald Trump for doing this. And he says that not just him, he's not the only one who's been disinvited. He said also his nearly 6-month-old grandson can't come to this event.
I just find this incredibly petty. I have been an intellectual opponent, a public policy opponent, and he's chosen now to uninvite me from the picnic and to say my grandson can't come to the picnic. I just the level of immaturity is beyond words. And so they've decided they want to declare war on my family and exclude us from the White House. I just think it really makes me lose a lot of respect I once had for Donald Trump. But petty vindictiveness like this, I don't know. It makes you wonder about the quality of people you're dealing with. And the same people that are directing this campaign are the same people that casually would throw out parts of the Constitution and suspend habeas corpus. So I think what it tells that they don't like hearing me say stuff like that, and so they want to quiet me down, and it hasn't worked.
You're talking about Stephen Miller. And I went on to ask whether that Stephen Miller, who's of course a very powerful White House aide, whether or not Rand Paul thinks he should continue to work at the White House. And John, he said, quote, I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is why this is significant too, John. Rand Paul has a vote, and there's a narrow Republican Senate majority. In fact, just 3 Republican senators. That's all that Donald Trump can afford to lose on a party line vote, particularly one to move across his massive bill to implement his domestic agenda. That bill is one that Paul himself has been sharply critical of because of his concerns over the deficit, concerns that it would raise the national debt limit. He does not want that to be part of this bill. And of course, that is what has caused Donald Trump and his aides like Stephen Miller to criticize Paul so sharply over the last several days and weeks. But he is indicating, John, that despite this move, which he calls vindictive and petty, he said he's not changing his position. He does not believe this pressure campaign ultimately will work.
Had a lot to say to you there, Manu. Manu Raju, thank you very much.
David, I want to ask you because Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, who has not been on the program, as it were, when it comes to President Trump's big, beautiful bill. He says it adds too much to the deficit. He was also critical of the military parade taking place this Saturday, saying that it's the kind of thing you see in North Korea, not America. Apparently, he was upset that there's been some blowback from the White House.
Well, apparently he was talking to Manu Raju and other reporters on Capitol Hill and went on quite a lengthy tirade, if you will, complaining about what he saw as pettiness for being disinvited. Just in the last few hours, apparently he got word that he was disinvited from the White House's congressional picnic tomorrow. He said, these are the kinds of things I've been at for 10 years here. Go to the White House every year. He had his grandson, young grandson going with him. And he said, now my grandson has been disinvited from the White House because they're playing petty politics. He also made clear that, like, he's still a potential yes vote on the bill if they remove the debt ceiling increase from it, that he would be open to voting for the bill. And he said, but they clearly have already counted me out of that calculation because this isn't what you would do if you were trying to actually woo somebody.
Yeah, I mean, White House officials say this is not surprising at all. Rand Paul has been a thorn in their side as they view it. They have been irritated with what he's been saying about the bill. They don't think he's going to ever get to be a yes vote because they're not getting rid of raising the debt ceiling in this vote or in this bill because they can't, they believe. And so they've been irritated by this. So their kind of view on this when I talked to some people was, why would he be invited to the White House?
Yeah, I just have this flashback to 10 years ago, the Republican debate that CNN did at the Reagan Library. And one of the very first things President Trump did, then citizen Trump did, was complain that Rand Paul was on the stage. It was like one of the very first things.
Contentious moments on Capitol Hill today as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth faced questions about the Marines deployed to Los Angeles over immigration protests.
Are the Marines in Los Angeles ordered to protect property by any means necessary?
Sir, I would say the ICE officers and police officers being attacked is not political theater. The National Guard and Marines,
just yes or no. Just yes or no.
The National Guard and Marines have the full authority to protect federal ICE agents.
Yes or no.
Just,
can you just say yes or no? This isn't Fox anymore. Just yes or no.
They're there to protect federal agents and federal.
Another BS answer.
Salud Carbajal there, a Marine veteran, by the way. NBC's Melanie Zanona is tracking this hearing for us from Capitol Hill. And here in the studio, U.S. Army and Iraq War veteran Allison Jaslow. Allison, to you first, your reaction to the Secretary's testimony today. We've seen him now on the Hill for a few days.
You know, I was mentioning this to you before, but I wish there were more questions about the downstream impacts of what's playing out right now.
Yeah.
You know, the time that Marines are on the streets of L.A. is time that they're not spending training. And I also have friends who are serving right now who are kind of over all the politics that are happening as it relates to the military. They're thinking about cutting their careers short. And you're going to lose some of the best leaders in the military in times like this, not the people who otherwise will just go along to get along in the military. And that's bad for our troops, especially the rank and file, who need strong leaders.
Yeah, and I think there's also the fact that this is coming against the backdrop of a military parade this weekend. It's the 250th anniversary of the Army, but then, of course, also President Trump's birthday. So that's getting headlines. But there are current and former Army officials who spoke to the New York Times who raised concerns that
what we have here is Donald being exposed again in Congress, exposed by senators on his own side, like Rand Paul, and exposed by Democrats, and exposed by the failure of his own people. Again, these are Trump hearings. These are his cabinet people. They are there as Trump puppets. I mean, even in a normal president, when you're hauling in a secretary, part of it is you want to ask that specific person questions, but let's also be clear. You can't really haul in a sitting president to comment in Congress. I think it's happened before in American history, but subpoenaing and successfully getting a sitting U.S. president, not a candidate, not a former president, whatever, to come and sit down and talk to Congress, talk to the Senate or House committees, it's basically impossible. So what you do is you basically put the puppet in the seat. The puppet in this case being Hegseth, but it could be Gabbard, it could be RFK Jr., it could be any one of the Trump stooges, right? It happened to just be Hegseth this time, and it's going bad for him. And here's the thing with Rand Paul. He's 100% right in this case. Rand Paul is in many ways a vile man. If you look at what he believes, he's the kind of guy who opposes federal aid during disaster relief. Until Kentucky a few years ago had a disaster, and then he supported disaster relief for Kentucky because he's a libertarian until the bill needs to get paid in his backyard. So I'm not a fan of Rand Paul at all, but he's right here in saying that Trump is being extremely vindictive and egotistical, not challenging Rand Paul on the debates of the policy of the bill, but just kicking him out of his event, saying, if you're not going to play my rules, I'm taking my ball and going home. He's being exposed by all sides.